Welcome to Buy the House, Build the Home. We are back another day, another episode. I'm going to let Shelby do the little intro here.
This is my friend Hannah.
Hannah with an H.
Hannah with an H. That's
We were
me.
talking about the importance of her name. It's a palindrome.
It is. Big deal.
Apparently, Betty thinks about that often.
It's so cool. Like race car, level, the words you don't think of, like mom, dad, wow, whatever. But like Hannah, it's cool. Anyways.
It is.
Hannah with an H.
Yes, but I've known Hannah, I don't know, 4 years? 3 years.
Yeah, something like that.
Met at George Coffee, where you currently manage. You do some other fun things, though. And we met through a mutual friend named Amy.
Shout out to Amy
love
Taylor.
Amy.
We love Amy.
Amy.
We love her.
My cutest blonde around. But we just became sweet friends through that connection. And when we were thinking about the podcast and what would be great for October when this releases is hosting for the holidays.
Woo!
Because all those parties are coming and all of us need help. So, Hannah, would you introduce yourself? How did you get into events? And then we can run from there.
Yeah. So I'm Hannah Clementt. I have been working in the hospitality industry for over 10 years. My first hospitality job was when I was like 14. I don't even think I could drive. So I've done a little bit of everything from catering to coffee shops, restaurants, wedding venues, and about 3 years ago, 2021, I decided to start my own event planning company. So I've been planning weddings and events professionally for about 3 years now, since being in DFW, and I love it. I also am the event manager at a small coffee shop here in Dallas, which is super fun. So events is pretty much my life. I do events every day, whether I'm hosting or planning or coordinating. It's super fun.
And what is your company name? Because I think it's so cute.
Yeah, it's Sweet Pea & Co. Events.
I knew you would love that.
Yeah, Sweet Pea & Co.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Cute.
it came from my granddad. He was a business guy, had his own business in Nashville for a lot of years, and he called me Sweet Pea. And so when I was thinking about what should my business name be, it just felt right that
That's
was
so
the name
cute.
of the business. So, yeah.
So cute.
Yeah.
And I will say, not everybody has the gift of event planning. So there's a big need. It's funny. I listened to this podcast and this guy was talking about the 3 things that can help you identify what you would be good at or whatever in life. And he's like, number 1, do you love it? Number 2, are you really gifted at it? And number 3, is there a need for it?
For sure.
And so sometimes if there's a need and you're good at it, but you are not passionate about it, it doesn't work. If you really love it and you're good, but there's not a need for it. But I feel like there is a massive need for people that are on the ball like yourself with planning
All
events.
the details.
All the details.
I hate the details. I'm like, can I
Same.
just show up
Love
and be
the
a good
details.
time?
Yeah.
Give me a good spreadsheet.
Exactly. Oh, wow.
Love
You're
it.
a spreadsheet
Yes.
girl, too.
Yes.
You love it.
Yep.
Well, do we want to dive right in?
Jump in.
Let's do it.
Okay. I think I would love to know from like A to Z, if I were to think I'm going to have a big gathering in my home, where would Hannah start?
Yeah. So if I'm having a gathering in my home, I'm going to start with date. I'm going to start with guest count. So the date obviously is dependent on what holiday party are you throwing. Is it Christmas, Thanksgiving? So kind of figure out the best time. Normally weekends obviously are best for people because they're off. And then thinking through what kind of event are you having. If it's a come and go and you're not necessarily all going to be seated at the same time, you can up that guest count. You know, if your house can fit standing room 30 people, then invite that many people. Or if it's a nice sit down dinner and your kitchen table only seats 8 to 12, then cap it there and figure out the people you want to be there, whether it's close friends or family or if it's a work party. The style of the event is going to dictate the guest count a little bit there.
Yeah.
So getting the guest count ready, and then invitations. So if it's more of a upscale dinner party, you could do printed invitations if you want to, especially if you're planning ahead. Like right now, if you're wanting to send out invitations for maybe something November, December, because mail just takes time. That's always a nice touch. A lot of people these days are opting for Evites because it's really cute and it's easy.
Yeah.
And Evite kind of does all the RSVP things for you. So that's a really nice hub just for invitations all around. You can give details of your event, what to wear. If you're doing potluck style, what to bring. Everyone can pitch in. So that's kind of what I would do next. And then I would start monitoring guest count and planning. So thinking through theme, decor, what's to eat, if you're going to do food, what activities, and then thinking through the amount of time you want these people in your home. What time do you want them over so you can prep well, and then what time are you trying to kick them out? So
I love, before we got on the podcast, and we're going to touch on this later, but Hannah said she has a special gift for getting rid of people eloquently.
The art of kicking people out.
Yeah. I'm ready to learn that because I'm definitely, my husband is a social butterfly, but I like hit a wall.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay.
Yeah.
Can you leave, please?
Yeah, and I'll just be like chatting back, and the next thing I know, it's midnight. And I'm like, what am I doing? I have to work tomorrow. Like, why did I just do that to myself?
No, it's tough. I think it depends on, honestly, the situation. I feel it out. I literally did a wedding for a friend once. It was 20 people in her living room. She and her husband got married. It was so beautiful and intimate. And part of it was they were like, hey, we really have a specific time we want this to end at because we want to leave, but they weren't doing like a big exit. And so they asked me, like, a big part of your job today is, can you just kindly have people get out the door? And so I would say good verbiage that I love to use. Well, let me back up. First, I would say if you know that you're going to have a time you want an event to end, set an end time. Have people get there at 6 and put on the invitation 6 to 9. Yeah. And then that people kind of expect to know when to leave. Yeah. If you don't give an end time, though, and you feel yourself getting overwhelmed, or you're like, I'm ready to go to bed, I'm ready to start cleaning up, winding down, good verbiage is, oh my gosh, thank you guys so much for coming tonight. Maybe have an activity planned to be like the last thing. So you can kind of introduce it and be like, so the last thing we're going to do tonight. And then that verbally communicates to your guests,
sets
like,
the expectation.
This is it. This is what we're doing.
As soon as we're done with this, you need to leave.
Right. You're not saying that, but you're setting that precedence by doing the introduction of, so for our last activity, or if it's just conversation, be like, well, guys, before everyone leaves, I did want to ask, and then it kind of, you're putting that into, you're not cutting it off right now. It's not rude. It's not like, get out of my house ASAP. Right. But it's giving this verbal communication of, hey, this is, we're winding things down. And then if that doesn't work, I start cleaning. I'll start just kind of slowly easing myself out of the conversation and start picking up, and just kind of giving that nonverbal, that physical cue of, things are ending. It's time to leave. Other things that are helpful is lighting. If you've had like moody, dim lighting for the dinner, turn on the lights so that people know this is a shift. If there's been music playing, you can stop the music. I mean, that it always helps people realize, like, okay, this is time. I've changed. Overstayed my welcome. And so those are just a few things that I've learned. But a lot of times in a conversation, if I'm ending it or someone's talking too long at my house at the party, I'll just kind of, once I feel the conversation getting to a place where it's not rude for me to end it, I'll be like, wow, well, this was so great talking to you. Wow. I am going to go take out the trash or start tidying up. Thank you so much for coming. Like, we've enjoyed having you guys tonight. Just kind of, when I was a dance teacher, I learned with discipline, you sandwich it. So you always say something uplifting, and then you say the hard thing, and then you sandwich it with something else sweet. And I've kind of carried that into my life with planning events and working with adults, is I kind of sandwich some, like, this could be hard, you could take this the wrong way, but we're going to give a lot of, like, edification in it as well. Time, so those are just some random
I need that
things.
Just for everyday conversation.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wow. It's so helpful.
So this was great.
No, it's so helpful. Yeah, and the more you do it, the better you kind of get. And it's just like almost making someone feel loved in saying a goodbye and just almost letting them know how grateful you are of the time that you've had. But within that, it's the time that you've had, not have or are having.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
They say scientifically too, or maybe, I don't know scientifically, but they say that when you hear something negative, you always need to hear 2 positives with it. So that makes a lot of sense, because your brain will latch on to the negatives too, even with kids, like just making sure to tell them I love you, making sure, you're beautiful. And then when you say the hard thing, like it kind of helps weigh out, because we take negative so much differently than we do positive. So that makes sense.
Yeah, for
a little
sure.
positive sandwich
100%.
right there. I love
I
it.
feel like
people out
adults
the
sometimes
door.
are just big kids, so we need it too.
But we all are.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had two other thoughts when you were kind of the intro to getting a party ready.
Yeah.
With head count, is there kind of an amount that you should expect? So say I invite 100 people. How many people should I expect to RSVP and actually attend? Or is that kind of like a no clue?
It's traditionally in the event industry, we say about 80%.
Okay.
If it's all really close friends and family, there's a lot more loyalty. So it could be higher. It could be lower if you're sending out invitations too last minute. If it's right now we're in football season. So if you're planning a dinner party, but there's a lot of guys coming and Dallas Cowboys are playing, you can expect if you don't have the game on, there's probably not going to be as many people show up. So there's definitely factors that will affect how much of your guest count will show up, that you can think through and take into consideration. Generally speaking, though, about 80%. But again, could be higher, especially if it's a really small group of people, close-knit, best friends. They might all come. So
how often would you say that you should remind people? Like, let's say you get the invitation out. Let's say you just go the Evite direction, paperless post, whatever. You put the invitation out 6 weeks before, and then how many times along the way are you reminding people about it?
For sure. So I always love to give a general invitation, like you said, 6 weeks ahead, not too far in advance, because people will not write it down and they'll just forget.
Yeah.
So 6 weeks is actually pretty good. And then I always like to send a few weeks later another reminder, a few weeks later another reminder, and then the week of about 3 in total that I'm going to be sending. You don't want to blow people's phones up, but life is just busy, and a lot of people don't write things down initially when they receive an invitation to something. And so generally within the invite process, about 3 reminders, 1 being the week of. That way when someone, Sunday is making their weekly schedule, they get that reminder and they're like, oh my gosh, yes, Friday night, we have these plans. And then they plan for that the week of and don't forget. So
I always appreciate reminders.
And then would you send one the morning of, if it's an evening, or would you do the night before? Like, as if you're on that week before, would you send something out? Tomorrow's the day, or this morning?
You could. I wouldn't. If someone's RSVP'd already, and you've connected with them in the week of, I probably wouldn't the day of. Unless they've agreed to bring something, and then I might follow up about, hey, what time are you planning on getting here? If they're helping set up, if they're bringing something, if they're just attending and you've already connected with them earlier in the week and they said yes. I'm just not a micromanager, so I maybe am too trusting of people's words sometimes, but I would say if you send enough reminders, then normally, unless they're an active part of the evening and they're not just attending, if they've said maybe, I will text them. I'll be like, are you planning on coming? Because you need to know what's planned for food. And but if they've given a solid answer, then I probably wouldn't follow up day of.
I'm bringing in my own personal problems with party hosting so I can get answers while you're here.
I got you.
I have a very eclectic group of friends. Friends with 20-year-olds, friends with 50-year-olds, people that are business owners, people that don't even know how to get up and go to work.
Yeah.
Quite honestly.
Adults and children.
Yeah.
Yes.
Grown children.
Yes. Grown children.
But there are times where I like to bring them all together. Like we love to do something called Friendsgiving.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered, is there a way to help marry all those personalities? Because that's just the reality of bringing even families together at the hospital.
Yeah.
Oh, no. At the holidays. I hope it's not a hospital. At the
Hopefully
holidays.
not. Hopefully not.
But that's just reality at times.
Yeah.
And have you seen that as an event planner where people do it really, really well, where they can bring all those different personalities together? Do you have any tips for that?
I always like to make sure that someone knows someone else in a party that I'm planning.
Okay.
I don't love inviting someone that genuinely doesn't know anyone else there unless I'm prepared to make a connection for them when they get there. Hosting parties with a group of close friends that all know each other is really easy because they can all just kind of entertain themselves because they know people. But it is tough when you have a Mod Podge group of friends coming under one roof that you love dearly, and you don't want to plan 6 different Friendsgivings for all of those friends. So giving people something to relate with is helpful. So plan an activity. My go-to game is always Fishbowl with house parties, because it's a game that you can have as many people play. Everyone can put in their input. It doesn't matter if you're an extrovert or an introvert. It's kind of just a nice game that can mesh a group of people and give them all something to have in common in that moment, and kind of break the ice a little bit when it's a room full of people that know each other. But there's lots of games like that you could do. I love table conversations. You can find like online, there's little boxes that you can keep on your table.
She would love that.
Yes, it's you just pull out a card and it's like,
Cute.
what table conversation are we going to do tonight? My dad is the best at this. Anytime we have people over, he does something called Martin Family Question of the Day. And so he will, if we have people over, even if it's just our family, we'll sit down at the dinner table,
so cute.
and he'll say, "Okay, guys, he's the best. He's the best, truly." But he'll be like, "Okay, it's time for Martin Family Question of the Day." And sometimes it's like, "What's your favorite color?" And sometimes it's a little deeper, like, "What do you think about this?" Or "What superhero would you be?" Or just, I mean, he comes up with it on the spot normally. Cute. But if you have something prepared like that too, if you know your group and everyone would be okay speaking in front of each other like that, where all the attention is on them, then that's kind of fun because it breaks the ice and gives people a chance to get to know each other in kind of a more organic way versus them just kind of sitting in the corner, sipping their hot chocolate, being like, who do I go up to and introduce myself to? And like, I don't know any of these people. So, yes, games that people can play, trying to make sure that everyone has a buddy, that when they get in that room, they're not completely alone. And if they don't, then be that for that person. If you're the host, it really does land on you to kind of make sure they feel welcomed and invited. And so just knowing that it's going to take a little bit more emotional energy when it is a room of people that don't know each other, because you are going to have to kind of make connections and network to a sense of like, oh, that person loves football and that person loves football. Let me start this conversation and then I can leave and they can talk amongst themselves. But sometimes people just need a little bit of help in those situations to make connections and then feel welcomed and comfortable.
I love that.
Yeah.
Do you have any? I have like 10 questions. Do you have any on your mind? Okay. I would love to talk about, so we've got the guest list. We've sent out the invites. We kind of know head count. We know how to help people mingle together, all that fun stuff. Is there a certain amount of time that is typically like a healthy amount of time for people to come and gather together? Like, I would think an hour is probably too short. Yeah. But I don't necessarily want to be somewhere for 5 hours either. So what is a healthy? For sure. I would say average for a dinner party at your house, maybe like 3 hours.
6 to 9.
Yep. 6 to 9, and it maybe even a little bit shorter, 2.5, if you don't have a lot planned. I think, you know, if you're doing a sit-down dinner, if you're going to play games, if you're going to be watching something, or, I mean, it kind of depends on exactly what you have scheduled. If it's just a dinner and there's nothing else going on, I would say probably like 2.5 hours is sufficient. People can come and go, obviously, at parties as they want, but there is kind of finding that sweet spot of if you don't have a lot planned, don't, you know, schedule a 4-hour event because it's going to get awkward. Generally, people can eat in like 45 minutes, honestly, and then they're done. And then it's like, well, what do we do now? What are we gonna do? I always, when I'm hosting, love to have something in my back pocket of if whatever I already have planned goes a little faster than I had intended, I have like something else that's smart in the back pocket to pull out and be like, okay, let's do this now, guys. And it eats up a little bit of time so that there's not that uncomfortable, like, okay, what do we do now from your guests? And then kind of to end on time. But I would say on average about 3 hours with a little bit of flex room if you have less planned or more, if you're really close to these people, or if it's just kind of a formality party where you're like, I need to have these people over, but we don't need to spend an insane amount of time together. So Yeah.
I will say I'm having a client appreciation event. I did my
Okay.
first one last year. Shelby helped me with it. And I was so nervous because not all my clients know each other.
Right.
Now, a lot of them do, like if we met at church or whatever that is. But I was like, okay, this might be awkward for people. But something that I did that you wouldn't necessarily do at like a dinner party, it was come and go. And we do 3 hours because I like the idea of, for some of my clients, it's like a date night too, right?
Yeah.
It's like, come, swing by, have a glass
Yeah.
of wine, and then go to dinner,
Yeah.
or go to dinner and then come back, whatever. But something that I wanted to do this just as I'm looking at this as this is what I'm putting my marketing money in, but I give prizes, and so I have like a raffle ticket, and people draw, and it kind of helps when
Yeah.
you break it up like once every hour. I'm going on the mic, like calling up who has raffle ticket number, whatever, and giving away a prize. And I think it keeps people engaged in a way. So that's another option that you can
The
do.
wine helps.
For sure.
The wine helps.
Always. Always.
Snacks, food. I think that's
Yes.
the thing. If you don't have food or drinks of some sort, it's awkward, which is really unfortunate because I feel like we've, as like a society, we expect that, but it definitely breaks it up for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that just with events culturally too, over history, you see that gatherings mainly happen over food.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's just a today thing. I mean, food, entertainment, all of that are kind of things that help socially break barriers and give people a common thing to have when they gather. And so I think that food and beverage is so important at an event. I always try to have some kind of snack or drink if someone's coming over, even if it's just like they're going to be here to watch a movie. I'm going to have some popcorn and candy, or I'm going to have someone bring something, because it honestly, I think, is a very important part of hosting. Which honestly, that's what I think the hardest part about hosting on your own is. You're not just the event planner, you're also the caterer, and you're the decorator, and you're the DJ, and you're you're doing all of the hats on a very small scale. But it can be a little bit overwhelming when you're like, I have to think all of this through. So that's where I say just like be your own admin. Plan really well. Get out a spreadsheet or a piece of paper or your notes app or whatever is the best way of organizing a day for you. And just write all the things down that you have to do and the food that you want to make, because it really does help. Like when you're throwing on any kind of event, whether it's client appreciation or a dinner party or a movie night, just having kind of your plans organized really relieves a lot of pressure from you, the host, that's doing 1,000 different things. Even though it's a really small scale, it can still be a weighty thing because you want people to enjoy themselves. But yeah, I will say if there's alcohol, you can extend your evening. I've all events like weddings, any event, anytime there's alcohol, people just stay longer. Like it's just a huge barrier breaker. And so that's just a little tidbit. If it's dry, it won't last as long, and that's okay. But if there's alcohol, you can plan for people to stay a little longer.
I don't know. I find that so funny. I feel like
funny.
when it's dry, people are like,
Fascinating.
okay, well,
All right, gotta go.
I'm done with that. I would actually love to talk about food and drinks. So first with drinks, is there, again, I'm going back to like holiday parties for the benefit of this podcast. Is there a certain amount of drinks that you should, like different kinds of drinks that you should have? Because in my mind, I'm a water girl, maybe a little bit of alcohol, here's hot chocolate. Yeah. But like, I've also gone to some parties that have like 4 or 5 different ornate, like I've got apple cider cooking, I've got all this kind of stuff, and I'm like, oh, should I do all that? Right. Is there a happy medium where it's not overwhelming for people, but you do have choices? Yeah, I would say knowing your guest count is pretty important, knowing what people want. Some group of people drink, some don't. Some people would love, a hot cocoa bar. Some people are fine with water. So the beverages and the food that you're having for your event is going to depend on that, like kind of just knowing your people, what they would enjoy, and then also knowing what the food is. Drink really follows food. If you're having a meal, maybe do like a pre-dinner cocktail, wine with dinner. If you're not doing a meal and it's just snacky, then maybe having some sodas and like canned things, especially if people are going to be walking around carrying
open cups of beverages is a little bit harder to like talk and drink than having like a glass bottle or a can or something like that. It's good to have I would say 2 to 3 options. So obviously ice water, I think, is always a necessity. And then if they're drinkers, maybe having a couple of like some wine ready or some beer. Or if you want to get fancy and do like a special fun cocktail. I've had parties where there's like a beer and wine and then one cocktail. That gets a little bit tough when you're like trying to at home bartend. I recommend making things in batches. Otherwise, as the host, you're standing there making espresso martinis for 2 hours for everyone all night when they want one. But I would say I would say have at least 3 to 4 glasses of ice water per person, which normally it's just you have ice in your fridge and water from the sink if you have filtered.
I went to a wedding one time and they ran out of water.
Yeah, it's common.
And like everyone was dancing and you're like, I mean, and then we drove an hour away to get out there. And by the time I got home, I was like, I have a headache. Yeah. And it was like, I know it was like a disaster for them because it was just like they didn't think it through and there wasn't. I think water is like so important to have.
It's so important. And people forget because it's just water, right? Yeah. Water's everywhere. And in a home party, generally it's a little bit easier because we have a sink. Right. And most people have access, I feel like, to filtered water of some sort. At venues, it's a little trickier because some of them are like, we don't have any water or things to pour water with. And you're like, great. But at home, that's a little easier. But just having, making sure to ice is so important. People forget ice too. If you're having a large party and you have Cokes, people don't want to drink a room temp Coke. So make sure if your ice maker only makes a little bit of ice, have, Billy, your husband, or cousin Joe go to the grocery store and grab get a couple bags on the way. Because having a cold drink really is, it's the small things that can, mean a lot to people when you're hosting. So
we've all gotten that text message like, hey, can you grab ice on your way? We kind of totally forgot about it.
And I feel like that's always the last minute thing. You're like setting the drinks out and you're like, we don't have ice. And so again, that's why I always say kind of try and think through your day before you actually get there and write everything down that you feel like you're going to need. That way you either A, yourself plan for it and make margin and time for it in your own schedule, or B, you have someone that's prepared and knows this is my role, I'm going to be doing this. It helps with emotions a lot because you're not like last minute texting someone when they're on their way, making them late to the event. So it just helps you be more at peace, helps them feel more at peace that you have everything planned out and ready to go and no one's scrambling. So
and giving people little jobs. Like I was thinking about the Friends episode where Phoebe's in charge of cups and ice. Have you seen this one? It's like the best because she goes all out and she has dry ice and like all these different ices and it's like makes snow cones and it's super cool. But I think it is nice to give people if it is bringing things, give people something to be in charge of.
When you're orchestrating events, if it is an event where you feel confident that you can ask people to help, I always say do it. Because better for you to do a few things 100% than you to do everything 10%. Right. And you're stressed and you're not in a good mood when you're hosting if you're feeling the weight of all of the little details on your own. And so I'm a big fan when I have people over of letting them be a part of it in a small way. And you have to be really good at communicating and delegating when you do that. And having specific instructions for people sometimes. But if it's, someone's going to bring napkins and another person's going to bring cups, you're kind of spreading out the weight a little bit and also the finances because hosting in your home can be expensive.
It can get very expensive.
Especially if you want nice food. You're not trying to get red Solo cups and like styrofoam plates. If you want it to be a little bit more upscale, it can get expensive. Those stuff, it's not cheap. And so just spreading that out a little bit, especially some people hire party planners, which is great. Most of us can't afford that. And so it's figuring out how to do that yourself and spread the love so that it is really nice and a little bit more put together. And you're also not doing everything on your own, which is great.
You just have to make sure those people are trustworthy.
100%.
And that they're going to do it. I often get asked to do the playlist for parties. And I'm like, yes, I love it so much. But I'm also like, what's the vibe, though? Because
for sure.
What we don't want is I'm blasting like Justin Bieber when it's like more of a John Mayer situation, So you just need to trust the person that you're requesting that they'll do, because the worst thing is the person shows up and they forgot the ice, or that's why, 100%. Or they forgot the cups that they were supposed to bring.
Happens all the
absolutely.
time, which is why I said day of, I will be texting the person bringing the ice, like, hey, you're bringing the ice, right? You have a plan for
it's a
lot of
managing. You're managing.
It is, yeah. Any event planning, whether it's on a really small scale or a large scale, really you have to be good at delegating and planning. And so honestly, if that's not your strong suit, that's okay. Maybe if you have a friend that it is, ask them, like, will you come over?
And they'd probably love to do it too.
Exactly.
I have friends like that
they
are like,
love it.
Sometimes you're the person with the home. But
For
it's
sure.
like, I don't want to do that, but I'm willing to open my home to you if you want to do it.
100%.
Right?
Yeah. On a large scale, when I do events, I love working with vendors because most vendors, not all, but most love what they do. So the caterer loves getting to work with food. The DJ loves getting to do music. So on a small scale, find those people in your life with hosting. You know, don't take on everything if you don't have to. And if you don't love planning and delegating, then see if you have a friend that does love that. Put them in their sweet spot, stay in your sweet spot, and collaborate, and just communicate well. I think that's a really big part of throwing events, is just good communication, good delegation. And if that's not you, find your person that is, chat with them about what you want it to be. And if you're good at like opening your home and just decorating and cleaning it to be ready, then have someone else do the more administrative aspect of the things and sending out the evites and monitoring the guest lists and delegating tasks, and then just open your home. And that's okay. You don't have to do every single thing just because you're hosting it in your home. And I think that's something that people forget, is to rely on their community. Again, some events you want to do it all, and that's great. And to that, I would just say, make sure you are really planning well, giving yourself a lot of time, buying groceries ahead of time so that you're not scrambling the day of or sending someone to a grocery store. Because that's also what I see a lot of times with people who host events, is if they're not planning ahead of time enough or they forget things, that causes a lot of anxiety. And when the host is anxious, everyone feels it. No one's happy. You're going to accidentally lash out on someone, and it's supposed to be a fun night. It's supposed to be relaxing and enjoyable. And so setting yourself up for success, even if it's thinking through the details, like, do I have a Bluetooth speaker to play music from? Is someone getting ice? What plates are we going to use? Have I thought through washing dishes at the end of the night? You know, I mean, there's just like so many little details that can feel very overwhelming, understandably, if you don't think through them. And so I always suggest just taking time ahead of time to just sit down and kind of walk yourself mentally through the day of what are the pressure points, where could I get frustrated, where do I need help, or how do I plan ahead to make sure that this doesn't get overwhelming and I myself can actually enjoy this party as well, because that can be really tough as a host to sit in it and be present with your guests.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can take this out just in life, right? It's like, even knowing what you're really good at and what you're not. And what's going to cause stress for you, and then delegating those things and taking those things off your plate. My mom we often have family for Thanksgiving, and she always gets so stressed out about the cleaning. Like, it's like she just, the day before, it's just, and I was like, Mom, you could also like hire, if you have it in your budget, you could hire someone to clean for you. She's going to do in 2 hours what would take you all day. And that really might be worth your like enjoyment.
Sanity.
Right. Your sanity.
Absolutely.
It's like when there's those things, like I always tell people, I'm like, it's totally worth it for me to hire a lawn guy, right? I'm going to pay the $35, $40, whatever it is for them to mow the lawn, because I don't want to do it and it stresses me out and I'm not good at it. So like knowing what those pressure points that you mentioned, and then coming up with a plan ahead of time to save yourself a lot of headache and tears,
100%.
because you do feel it when you're the guest of an event, and it's a lot of tension and stress, and it's usually because someone is a bit of a control freak. Doesn't want to let go because they want to make sure it's done right. So it's like, no, like let go and be, because that's what makes the event enjoyable. And even if there are little things that go wrong along the way, like sometimes those make the best stories. It's like, it's okay. We're all here to be together and hopefully have the shared goal of connection. Right. So,
I was going to say, you made me think of our first Friendsgiving ever. It's probably 4 or 5 years ago because it's now it's an annual thing. The oven we were using, we didn't realize was not heating at the level that it should have. And we had 20 people over, and it took 2 extra hours to cook that turkey. That we thought it did.
Oh my
and people hung in there with us.
Yeah.
And to this day, the originals, the OGs that still come to our parties now are like, do you remember when you did this? And I was like, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But what I've learned too is if you're just starting to host parties, and I'm talking about parties that are bigger, like our last Friendsgiving was like 75 people.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of getting into that, give yourself time to learn and to grow. Each party that you do will get better. Like over the course of years, we now know how to cook the meat and keep it warm. We have warmer plates. We have serving utensils that I didn't have those first couple of years, where we're just like, oh my gosh, find an extra spoon. And now I'm like, well, no, I have, 25 things specifically for this serving. Yeah. And so give yourself grace to gather all the things that you might need or want for your parties, but build each year.
Yeah.
Expand as you go, and what do you actually enjoy and what do you want to do? We always do potluck style, and I've had to learn how to best communicate with people for each dish that they're bringing, because the first couple of years I was so stressed out of like, oh my gosh, are they going to do it right or the right?
There's 9 different kinds of mashed potatoes. We don't need any more of
exactly.
those. Yeah.
And so I had to learn how to properly communicate all of that and then follow up with people. And it's not an exact science either. There's times where people show up with a dish this big and I'm like, there's 75 people here, guys.
Right. And then they feed 4.
Yeah. But it's fun if you can kind of lean into it. And like you were saying, don't reach for perfection.
Yeah.
That's not what people are looking for. They're looking for a good time, for a social time, for just kind of a night off to enjoy themselves. So if you can keep that in the back of your mind and bring that type of energy and focus and thought to it, I think most events go pretty well. We're coming to the end here. Are there any, like, I don't know, off the top of your head, tips and tricks that you'd be like 100% bring this into your party is going to set it apart, that type of thing? I know we've already talked about so much.
Was a great one. I loved that because I love questions so much. And even doing like with, my nephews and nieces, I'll be like, what's the rose in your day and what's the thorn in your day? Like, and it just opens up things. So I think that's a great tip if you want to touch back on that, and then any others that you have.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. People love conversation. People love connecting with one another. And so I think at especially parties that you're throwing at your home, you want people to enjoy themselves, feel seen, feel heard. I think it can be easy in a crowd of people to feel like you're kind of unimportant or non-existent when you're going to a party. And so as a host, setting up, activities or questions or things where everyone feels like they've had a moment, to be them and for people to see them. So I think that's really great. Obviously for holidays, I would say decor, that's really big. There's lots of fun DIY things that you can do to not break your bank, to decorate for Thanksgiving or for Christmas. And if you have kids, get them involved, go collect leaves in the backyard and use some of the orange leaves for like a table runner situation, or go thrift some candle holders and have some moody candlelight. I think there's just a lot of different ways, and there's so many resources on, Pinterest and different things that you can look at to get inspiration for what you want your party to look like and how you want it to feel and be set apart as far as ambiance goes. The playlist, is it more of a chill night? Do you want people to be really energetic, and should it be more of a hype playlist? At the end of the day, though, with events, I think I see the hardest part for me is I see people get so upset when things don't go right, especially if you're type A and you want to be in control and you want everything to be perfect. And honestly, when you work with people, nothing's ever going to be perfect because people are imperfect. And I don't think that is ever the goal. Obviously, I'm an event planner, and so my goal is to make sure that any event I plan does go perfectly for the client that I'm planning it for. But at the end of the day, there's an overall reason that you're hosting an event, that you're throwing a holiday party. Maybe it's for friends that you haven't seen in a while. Maybe it's your work friends that you guys never get to actually talk about your lives because you're always in the office. Maybe it's family and they're driving in from all different cities. So I think at the end of the day, when you've set yourself up for success, when you've planned and you've delegated, and you've kind of done your best to take care of all the details, the biggest advice that I would give, and maybe the hardest to receive, is just to relax and let it go and go with the flow. If something doesn't go exactly as you have planned, it really is okay. Most people won't even know. And if they do, just laugh about it. Like you said with the oven, you know, you cannot control that. You can't know. You can't predict that that's going to happen. And so just making the best of it and remembering that it is, during the holidays, it's about the people. I think it can get really heavy sometimes. You're going through a lot of emotions. The holidays aren't happy for everyone. And so I think gathering people and just seeing them and knowing that at the end of the day, it's about the people that are there. It's not about even the food that you have. It's not about the music. It's not about the cute decorations. Those can all be a part of it. But it's about being with the ones that you love. And so I think that's the hardest sometimes that I see people struggle with, is just when you're hosting, knowing when to let things go and just let it be and accept that life isn't perfect and neither your party will be, you know? I mean, maybe it goes flawlessly, but if it doesn't, it really is okay, and no one's going to remember. And if they do, it's probably in a funny, joyful, or happy light because you all were able to be together. The worst memories that I have personally at holidays is when people are getting stressed or anxious, or someone's late, or the food isn't done fully, or someone forgot to bring something, and instead of the host giving grace and just rolling with the punches and keeping the main thing, which is community and people, and they get upset. That's what I remember. And it's not in a good frame of mind. And so I would just encourage anyone out there planning a party, do your due diligence. But at the end of the day, know that it is just a party. It's about the people that you're with. And just enjoy it. And don't take it too seriously if it's not all picture perfect, because it's okay.
I love that.
I heard someone say one time, it's just for relationships, and I loved the advice, but is this a moral issue or is this a preference issue, right? You get in a huge argument with your husband about the way he puts the dishes in the dishwasher, and it becomes like a moral thing, like this is right, this is wrong, instead of like, oh, this is my preference, and you're not doing it to my preference, and scaling, like, well, we're not saving babies here, right? We're like, we're throwing a party, you know? So, and I also think how someone feels at the end of the night, how someone feels when they, for me with a client, how do they feel when they walk away from a showing with me, from a conversation on the phone? Did they feel like I was listening? Did they feel heard? Did they feel like I'm patient? Did they feel that? I think is such a key just for life. And the best parties I've ever gone to are the ones where you leave connected, edified, you know, encouraged, and seen, right? It's like those things, if you can do that with people well in an event, I think it's a win, no matter if someone spilled a glass of wine on the table runner, you know?
100%. And honestly,
the A-type starts breathing heavy over here.
But like, what if that is an opportunity to remind them that their worth is not in the mistakes that they make, but in the fact that you just love them?
Or it's an opportunity to get them to buy you a new table runner.
That's true. Or another bottle of wine.
Talk to your therapist about why the table runner was so upset about that.
No, I think that's, we started the podcast off with me telling you guys that my business is named after my granddad. That is one thing that I learned from him. He was a CFO of a large company. And when he and I would talk about just life and business, and I would ask him what the most important thing was, he would always remind me that people don't remember what you say or the achievements that you accomplish, in this case, maybe the party that you throw, but they will remember how you made them feel. And so if that is you're anxious the whole time, you're closed off because you're stressed, you're not willing to engage and sit down and have a conversation with someone, or that can be you're going with the flow, you've planned well, you're present with them, maybe they need a hug, maybe they need some care that night, maybe they just want to have fun because it's been a long couple of months, you know, and so the way that you make your guests feel really is so important, and honestly, that's all they're going to remember at the end of the day. 5 years down the road, they're going to remember the fun that they had, not, oh my gosh, the tablescape was gorgeous or the lighting hit. You know, they're not going to remember that. They are going to remember the feeling, exactly what you said. And I think that goes for so many things in life as a leader and a business owner and just a friend in general. But it also applies to planning and hosting. So,
I love it.
I love that. Well, Hannah, thank you for being with us today and just sharing all that wisdom. We're all going to have the best parties this holiday now.
I believe in y'all. It's going to be amazing.
If people want to reach out to you for their own parties or for other corporate events, or even you said you did weddings, how can they reach you? What's the best way?
Yeah, so I have an email. It's sweetpeaandcoevents@gmail.com. I also have a website, sweetpeaandcoevents.com.
Love it.
So you can email me. Yes, you can go to my website. I have Facebook, social media. You can call me if they want to. Yeah.
Love
so
it.
that's the email's my best way of communication. But
Amazing.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Of
You were
course.
amazing. So.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. Well, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.